The Elements of Eloquence, How to Turn the Perfect English Phrase by Mark Forsyth. This is a paperback book. I cannot even tell you what color I think that is. I don't have a word for that color. Peach? Sort of a shiny peach? I don't know. That is a crazy color. I like it. So this one's paperback. It's just nothing special about it. He wrote three books, at least three books, that sort of go together well. And I'm going to do a video on each one of them. The Elements of Eloquence is today's. The Etymologicon is another one. And the Orologicon or Horologicon is another one. So for today, the Elements of Eloquence. And they each have these different sort of shiny, shiny cover. All right. The idea here is that he goes through, I'll show you the table of contents, but basically he goes through a bunch of different sort of rhetorical devices and the names of these devices, explains what they are, and gives lots of examples from classical and modern literature where people use them to make their language better, to make it sound better, to be eloquent in a word. So that's what it is. But he's very funny. He uses a lot of humor, and the words are, many of them, things I've never really heard before, or I've heard some, it's somewhere in the back of my head, but there are some of them I've never heard before. I had never really heard of this word before, for example. That one's funny because he says, you never know when it's actually being used. Okay. I don't know what that one is. Epizeuxis. And then some of them I have heard before. But again, he doesn't just say, well, here's what this term is and here's what it means. He gives lots of examples. He says, well, this is why it works. This is where it works. This is someone who's used it in a way that works. And it's pretty good. It's interesting. I suppose practical for someone who is, someone could actually say, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to try that. Yeah, I'm going to try to use that. Whether you remember what it's called is beside the point, but you can say, oh, that I can see why that makes for good writing. You say it this way instead of that way. Yeah, and on top of that, it's just interesting as someone who loves languages and language and English, and I'm very interested in it. So, having said all that and how much I like the book, I'm now going to talk about a part where I didn't like, and that's completely unfair, but that's what I'm going to do because it's the kind of person I am. So it's his discussion of zeugma. And, look, this book doesn't have any pictures or anything, so it's not like I think they do have an illustrated version too. Yeah, see, I've got the wrong version. But of course mine was cheap. As you can see, the spines cracking and what have you. But, okay, so zeugma, maybe you should look up what zeugma is in a different, somewhere else. But the thing is that he says it doesn't really work in English, okay? And he shows some examples from classical period writings where it kind of works. But he's like, okay, well, in those classical things, it can work. Basically, okay, so you have one verb that covers several nouns. I mean, he gives the example, but passion lends them power, time, means, to meet. Okay, and this means passion lends them power, lends them time, lends them means, to meet. And what he's saying is that this is an incredibly difficult sentence to understand. Passion lends them power, time, means, to meet. Like this is not easy to understand, and so he's saying it doesn't do well in English. Well, I think he's really missing where zeugma can be used in English because it can be used in quite a witty way. And I'm going to come up with some examples that aren't, don't blame me if they're not witty, but you can see how they make sense. They're not challenging to understand, which is his main thing. He was saying, we're not used to in English having the verb be so far away from the noun. You have the verb way over here, and then the nouns are way over here, and we don't know how to connect them. But an example I don't know. Let's see. She gave him a romantic gift. He threw it across the living room, breaking the TV and her heart. Okay, he broke the TV and he broke her heart. That is Zeugma, and it works perfectly, and it's quite clever, if I do say so myself. And it's not challenging to understand. And what's clever about it, well, to the extent that it is actually clever, is that it's using broke in two different ways. Now, you could say he broke the TV, the lamp, and the present, okay? And that's using broke all in one way, and that's Zeugma, and that's not difficult to understand. He broke the TV, the lamp, and I don't know, anyway. But when you use it to mean a different kind of break, then I think it starts to get kind of interesting or fun. He lost the card game and his patience. This is not hard to understand, and it's a kind of a witty turn of phrase that can be, again, I'm not saying my examples are particularly witty or whatever, but you could imagine reading a book and sort of chuckling a little bit at some Zeugma, and he seems to think that Zeugma can only be used by, Milton or something like that. So, okay. Again, I've spent the majority of this video talking about something I didn't like in the book, but the fact is I really like the book. I think it's a really good book and funny and interesting, and I actually would recommend it to anyone who likes that kind of thing. What can I say? If you like that kind of thing, it's the kind of thing that you like. That's the elements of. Oh, I'll just say this book does not have an index. And that also kind of drives me crazy, because it's one thing if the items were in alphabetical order, but they're not. So you kind of have to search through it. What was I looking for? I was looking for synecdoche. And it was especially tricky because it wasn't even the first thing. So I'm like, where is synecdoche? Does he not have synecdoche? And then I found it. Anyway, okay. So I wish it had an index, and I wish that he talked about Zeugma in the way that I love, but he didn't. But the rest of it's really great. Okay, that's the Elements of Eloquence. How to Turn the Perfect English Phrase by Mark Forsyth.